Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of Fuzzy Memories from the Road with Brandy Green and
And I'm Dustin Pari, and with me today is our very special guest. This is my cat, Raisin, also known as the Mouse.
Raisin, aka the Mouse, is the
Yeah,
one that we've heard, I think, on a previous episode in a bag of some kind.
yeah, she likes to sit in paper bags and do that kind of thing, like a
You know,
mouse
I
does.
I cannot stop thinking about the comparison, the visual comparison of you and Dr. Evil right now.
Yes, indeed. I have a little more hair than the good Dr. Evil, and Raisin's a little bit darker in color. But everything else, she's wearing her nice froggy pajamas tonight, so they have little frogs on them. She's a fancy girl. She gets
Very
cold
fancy.
this time of year.
Very fancy, and yeah, it's starting to get very cold,
Yeah.
which is actually a really great segue into this first part of this episode. So
Where
we
are we
were,
going? Cold, miserable.
yes, shocking. Um, so we're going to Denmark in this one. The GHI episode was called Buried Alive. And so the
Very
first
catchy.
location was in Zealand, Denmark at Dragsholm Slot. And so I remember it being very cold. And
Yeah.
speaking of fancy, our client was wearing like a three-piece suit. He was very ready for the occasion.
He may have been the best dressed client we ever had.
I really think so. I
Yeah,
really think so. Yeah.
indeed.
Um, so what was interesting about this, so Dragsholm Slot, basically in the Viking era, a drag meant somewhere that they could drag their long ships in off of the waterways and kind of hide in, away from potential invading armies. And that's what this place was. It was like an inlet, and it had a lot of history, like
Yeah.
really cool history. Um, but coming more to the forefront, what I specifically remember about this place was this was a location with more human remains.
This was, I think, one of the more interesting stories of human remains, as our client kind of related to us as if it was like a nice thing. And I think she just saw herself on the screen. It's like, what's going on? There's another cat. It's okay. All right. I'm going to let her go over here. Go ahead, have fun. Our fancily dressed client, he when he was bringing us around on the tour, he had mentioned he's like in here we have walled up the daughter of, what was it, like a nobleman or something that lived there,
Right.
because she fell in love and was impregnated by like the stable boy or something, and I remember him specifically saying, "Isn't that a nice way, like, to have killed her? To kept her here, walled up, like they walled her up alive. There's no nice way to kill anyone, especially your daughter." Like, it was just insane. But he seemed like quite taken with it. Like, this was a nice thing that this guy did. How wonderful.
No, I remember that too, and I remember you talking about that basically for like the rest of the trip. You would just randomly mention it, and we're like, yeah, I know. It's like, it's crazy. She was like 16, or she was young, and she,
Yep.
of course, the typical story, falling in love with the stable boy. She ended up getting pregnant, but it was like a scourge on the family name,
Sure.
they couldn't have that. And
Those
so
stable boys are very potent. You got to stay away from them. I don't know, it's being all that time with horses or something. I'm not sure how
must
it
be
works.
all that like potato and grits.
Yeah, something like that. All I remember was thinking, they walled up this girl alive, which means like for a time she was still in there for like at least a couple of days or so,
Right.
like screaming and yelling, and it's just awful.
I know, how horrifying for her. And yeah, I just remember you walk through this one of the back hallways, and it's just like this little tiny alcove, like addendum to,
Yeah.
you know, what is this huge castle? And it's like, oh, by the way, that's the chick that's in the wall.
Right. So weird. I think it was like it wasn't even discovered. I want to say it was in the 30s or something. They were having some work done, like a plumber or something, and they
Yeah, it
found her
was like,
like,
it was
walled up there.
early, yeah, it was early turn of the century. And they're like, oh, okay, so we found bones.
So there's this, yeah. Supposedly in a white dress, a skeleton in like a white dress,
Yeah.
and
And
that's she's the lady in white. That's there.
right, right. And there was another lady too, a gray lady or something that I think our client referred to as like more of like a guardian angel sort of figure.
Yeah, she like looked after guests and people that would come through the place if they had any kind of problems or whatever. She would kind of look after them. I want to say there was a story of like a stairwell or something, and she stopped somebody from falling. And her backstory was like she worked there and had like a toothache or something, and the guy that ran the place like took care of her, and so like in order to repay her debt, she stays there to help out.
Right. Um, so in terms of the investigation, truly all I kind of remember of this place is being with Joe Chin down in the prison, the dungeon area, which actually has a pretty cool, interesting story. So during,
Yeah, some cool backstories.
right, so during the religious wars, during the reign of Mary Queen of Scots, they actually, at that castle in their prison, they held one of her husbands there as a prisoner. He was an earl of Bothwell. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I can't.
Uh,
You're correct. I remember that much.
but yeah, so like he was just one of many people that were held as prisoners down there. And I remember being down there with Joe Chin, and I didn't really experience anything. Joe, I think, like got bit. He was hearing voices,
Yeah.
but I didn't experience any of that. But truly, that's all I kind of remember of this place.
That's pretty much all I remember of the case too. It's the place Joe Chin got bit, and there was supposed to be like a mad jester or something else was like another person that was in the basement. Like the basement was the big hotspot. It was we've got a basement where we kept people chained up, and then we've got a place where we walled up the guy's daughter alive. Like just so crazy. There's supposed to be like sounds of wailing and moans from the basement. Um, but I don't remember experiencing much of anything there. If I did, I just remember it being overshadowed by Joe's claim of being bit there. And I
Yeah.
remember like he showed us, and it looked like there was like a tooth missing or something in the little marks. But yeah, I don't remember. There was. I remember the crew. I think stayed separate from us in this place. Like when you left the castle keep and went down, there was like apartments or something off to the left. I think they stayed there. We stayed in the castle or something like that.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention that, I think, fuzzy memories, people.
Of course,
Um,
do our best.
but I think this is the place that with the haunted room 10 or 12 or something like that. And I think that I stayed in that room because there was like a wardrobe that was supposed to be haunted.
The haunted wardrobe.
Apparently, like the story was there was a boy, and I don't know if this was supposed to be the the stable boy that the girl had fallen in love with or just a separate person. But apparently he was kind of like a peeping Tom, and he would like hide, he would get
In the
into the
wardrobe.
castle. Yeah, and he would hide in the wardrobe in the
Yeah.
room and like watch the women as they like undressed and slept and stuff. And apparently you could hear like scratching from the
How do you
inside.
get out of like? It just seems like a horrible hiding spot. Like, not that peeping is correct in any way, but if you were going to peep, in a wardrobe seems like a very difficult location to have access and an easy escape.
It was like a really odd story, and I remember going in there, sleeping in there, and didn't hear anything. Nothing happened, and I don't think we really deemed that location haunted.
I think it was one of those weird activities because of Joe Chin's experience, but other than that, not much else going on.
Right. Yeah. I just, again, remember it was cold, like usual. I remember staying in the castle, at least for a portion of the time, though I do remember, I think we were staying in the castle while crew stayed in those far off apartments.
Yeah.
But then like the last couple days, I think we got the modern amenities and we like swapped.
I think we did too. I remember there was like a kind of a falling out about it. Like it wasn't an easy thing. Like, I mean, we always loved our production crew, but like sometimes it was like, you know, we should be able to stay in a nice place too.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take a shower with warm water
Yeah.
instead of like filling a basin and like.
Good times. Yeah, that's all. That's I think that's the end of fuzzy memories for old Dragsolm.
Oh, good old Dragsolm or
That's right.
Solm
You
or.
wall up your daughter, and you're a nice guy.
Yeah, why not?
Just awful. Beware those stable boys. That is the lesson learned there.
Yep.
I'm going to move the mouse here because now it's crawling around.
Come here, mouse.
The second stop during this GHI episode was back to Brazil. We didn't really fly to Denmark just to go back to Brazil.
Not this time.
No. This location was the cultural center, which was actually in Rio de Janeiro, up in a favela. So if you don't know what a favela is, you can look it up online. But basically, it's this autocratic kind of mountain village that's run generally by the cartels. The local police department of like Rio don't even go on like on the ground. They do like air raids because it's so unsafe. And so naturally LA thought, you know where we should send them?
Yeah, this is the place for our people. You know, it's just if you're not from the favela, don't come to the favela because you won't understand the favela.
No,
but there we were.
Yeah, and there we were with our convoy of what, 6 or 7 vehicles that were packed
with equipment. Yep.
Packed with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment and money, and we were like thought to be like the American Hollywood actors, you know, or something to them, you know. They probably thought we were worth a lot more money than we really were.
We had to pay for an escort, basically protection to go in and out of the case. And the escort, if I remember correctly, was like a 14-year-old kid with a gun that looked bigger than him, but he only had to protect us from his friends that were all paid off. So it was fine for us to be there. Although I remember them telling us not to leave before sunrise because there were like people waiting like at the end of the thing there. So
yeah, it's
like
so
vampires.
true. So
once the sun came up, they'd go away.
They're vampires up in the favelas. Who knew?
That's it.
But no, I do. I remember, like, I can close my eyes and actually visually see us. We had a convoy of vehicles and we're driving through these very narrow streets that had like cinder block apartments built on top of each other.
Motorcycles zipping in and out of the place.
Yeah, with like razor wire on the tops of them. And on the top of these buildings were like 12-year-olds holding like AK-47s, just following our convoy as we drove through. It was insane. And we were told, don't leave, because if you leave, we can protect you in here.
Right.
As soon as you leave, you'll be robbed, raped, and murdered, and not necessarily in that order.
That was a specific thing too. I remember that. Not specifically in that order was what was told to us. Which was so bizarre.
Yeah, and you're right. Our protector was like smaller than I was.
Right. If you took the gun away from him, I would have put my money on you any day.
Well, you know. So this place, what was odd about the favelas, you know, it's so kind of, it's sort of uncontrolled in our sense of things, but really, I mean, the militias, the cartels do control the favelas quite well, quite militantly.
They keep things in order there.
Right. However, when you go there, like as an American, so I can only speak for us, but it was like chaos, and it was scary, and it was like thrilling at the same time because you didn't know what could happen, right? And
Yeah.
I remember it was like 2 a.m., maybe 3 a.m., and Angela and I were investigating like the main entryway that had a glass ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And I remember we're sitting there doing like an EVP session, you know, the typical thing. And she's like, she kind of nudges me. She's like, Brandy, like what? She goes, and I look up, and there is a silhouette of a man laying on the glass ceiling, and you see the silhouette of his gun next to him, and he's just staring in at us, just like waiting for us to like mess up.
Nice and safe.
Super safe.
My memory from the place was being up on the roof in the back of the place, and I was walking with Rob, and I don't know what time it was somewhere, you know, well after midnight, and hearing gunshots, and we were up there trying to do an EVP session on the roof, and we were just like, this is not worth it. Like, let's just go back inside the building.
And when you heard that, when you were up there and you heard that, Angela and I, that was about the same time we saw that guy. And we heard the gunshots too. And look, I mean, I think she was from like Miami. I grew up in Minneapolis. Like, we know what a gunshot sounds like.
The farm, yeah.
And I remember looking over to Dave Hobbs, who was our director, and I'm like, just gave him that look like, really? And he goes, no, it's okay. Those aren't gunshots. Those are fireworks, because they're just so excited that you're here.
Oh, right, yeah. Fireworks. Dear Lord. My God. It was rough. And all the good memories that I have about Rio that I mentioned in some other place, which wasn't Rio, or somewhere else in Brazil. If you watch that episode, apply those stories here. That's where they would have gone, if I remembered it correctly. But Brazil all blended together. That, as far as the case, I remember, because it was a cultural center, they had like some items and such that they thought may have attachment. What was the deal with like the actual building or whatever it was? Like, what was the story?
Right. So obviously, I mean, anyone that knows anything about history, you know that the slave trade didn't just happen here in the United States of America. It happened down in South America as well. And so they had a lot of slaves that were being shipped into Brazil from Africa. And of course, many of them never made the voyage. And so the claim was, and I don't remember if they were actually able to validate this through archaeology or anything like that, but they believed that the building that sits there now, the cultural center, was actually built on top of a slave burial ground. And so there's a lot of claims of like the sound of chains or the apparitions of slaves or things like that.
Yeah. I just remember wanting to get out of there in one piece. Was there some cultural thing that happened there?
Yeah, so we had a lady, she was very, very sweet. Her name was Aunt Lucy.
Lucy, there we go.
And I don't know what kind of religion she practiced. It was some African / like Catholic combo religion. There's a number of them down in Brazil.
Protection ceremony or something.
Yep. She was like a medium, and she like a seer or something like that. And she performed a ceremony before we all investigated the location. And it was super cool. Like, I was so bummed when I watched the episode, when everyone else watched the episode. And I didn't see that.
Yeah, because it was a nice little bit of like local color and flavor and history. Like those, some of the things that, and I understand there were time constraints, but those kind of things I think really added a lot of flavor to what it was that we were doing, you know, and especially being at a cultural center, like it really makes sense to have that kind of shown to everybody there, you know, because we get to experience it, which was great. but
Right.
they didn't show it to everybody else.
Well, and specifically in this location, but I think as a whole for our show, what made our show so different than the one stateside or any of the other, American ghost hunting shows is
Yeah,
that we did deal with culture. I mean, that's what we did.
yeah,
Not every location was just some guy named Joe who had a haunted,
yeah, right.
bar in the middle of Chicago, like
Yeah,
we
we had
were
to learn a
dealing.
little bit about the people, a little bit about their way of life, their religion, their history. There was a lot that went into it, like every case. And since we traveled so much, it was always very different.
It was, and that's why I was always so gutted when those aspects, those elements of it never made air because it's like we might as well be anywhere, really. If we're not going to show that, that's what makes us different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember this was before you had joined us, but I remember being in New Zealand. It was like one of my first cases with the GHI team. And we had this whole thing where we were going to go meet the Maori tribe and do like a ceremony. We did this sharing of breath. But this went on for like a day and a half. And like, I think they may have showed like just a quick snippet of it if they showed anything, It was nothing like what it felt like when we were there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we had a number of those situations where we all kind of just shook our heads and were like, oh,
Yeah.
really?
Well, because it kind of got to the point where it was like, why are we even filming this if we're not going to be able to utilize it? Like it's great for the experience, which
Mhm.
was fine, but then don't make Aunt Lucy like, do it 3 or 4 times, for editing purposes if we're not going to use it at all. Like,
Right.
let us just do it and experience it for what it is, but don't make people have to keep doing retakes on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It got very frustrating. And I feel like the further I had gotten into filming with the show, and, you learn very quickly. I mean, you hit the ground running when you join a show like that, especially an international one where it's not like you're home and you just, you go for the weekend and film. Like, this is your life.
Yeah.
Like, you were gone for over a month at a time. You're home for like 2 days, and there is no breathing room. And so I started taking those things kind of personally because it's like, you're not seeing this, like, you know. So that was a big bummer, I felt like, for this episode. I think the viewers and anyone watching this, like, feel free to send us a message. There's a discussion board on Facebook. Just tell us what you think. But I think as a viewer, that's something I would have wanted to see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. And, I think that it was nice to have the experience. It would have been nicer if we could have shared it with everyone, for sure. But then you started, for me too, like toward the end when I was kind of getting tired of being on the road, I was like, you're wasting my time. Like we're taking extra days on the road sometimes to do these trips, to go film these things that you never show. Like, why are we bothering,
Right.
Like the first, second, third, maybe fourth and fifth time we went to a winery, it was still fun. But then after that, it's like, we're gonna go do this all day again. Like we never use this. Like we could have stayed home one extra day. Why am I here?
No, it's so true. It's so true. And there was some contention throughout, and I think that's normal. But shifting gears, kind of staying within Rio, one thing that I did really enjoy that wasn't filmed for the episode at all, it was just a personal day that we all took with the crew. I think the crew had a day off too. We went to Cristo de Redentor, the Christ the Redeemer statue.
Right. Yeah, that was great. That I mentioned in the wrong episode that we did previously, but yes, that was one of my favorite times. I remember they're very good with directing the tourist traffic to the attraction. Like you went up the stairs one way, then there was like a gift shop, you could buy your plastic Jesus, and then you come down the other way, And I'm a Christian, so you can go ahead and hate me for saying plastic Jesus, but that's what they're selling. For me, but being there at the foot of the statue, and I remember I had my rosary with me, and it was very much a moment of it was just very special. It was a moment to be in awe of such an incredible creation, but the dedication of that monument to Christ, I think, was very fantastic. It was one of my favorite parts of being down there. But as we travel on, and we go to places like, you know, the big cathedrals and all that stuff, and all the ornate gold that you see kind of in the Vatican and everything. I remember Barry asked me once, I went to Notre Dame Cathedral, when it came out, Barry asked me, he's like, did you find him in there, DP? And I was like, what? He's like, God, is he in there? I was like, no, he's not in there. It just didn't, you know, despite all the ornate attractions and all the gold and the statues and stuff, a lot of times it felt just very hollow spiritually. But the time in Rio, despite the little gift shop, which I get you have to have, I think being at the foot of that statue and being up there on the hillside and looking down on the town and everything was just really, really awe-inspiring and really an incredible memory and experience.
You know, and I have to agree, I am not religious, I'm not Christian, but even I was in awe. And I think for a different reason, for me it was, one, it's just this massive construct, right? Like, you, literally, if you look all the way up, you feel like you're going to fall backwards.
Yeah,
you
sure.
really do. But it's something that city, that country, I feel like they assemble around, they all sort of connect with this one giant icon. I don't know. It was an interesting experience, and I've had that experience in a few different places, and for different reasons. But it was a very powerful moment for whatever reason. Not to mention the view of like the sugar loaf and the ocean and all of that was amazing.
Yeah, beautiful. Really nice. Really
Yeah.
nice.
I really liked Brazil. I mean, the favelas, you know, but overall, I mean, now I think we've completed our Brazil experience. We talked
Yeah, I don't think we fly back there anymore after that. But yeah, I'd agree for sure. I would definitely concur. I think Brazil was one of the nicest countries that we had the opportunity to visit. Like, great people, really cool locations. Favelas aside, you know, but they kept us safe. As sketchy and scary as it was okay.
Well, you weren't with me and a few of the other team members, but we on our day off went purposefully into the favelas, like a different section, a different favela.
So I don't go. I just avoid if I have to.
We were lucky to find one cab driver that was willing to take us. And I remember one of the other cast members like whipped out their camera and were like taking pictures outside the cab window. And we're like, no, don't do that.
Right. So crazy.
It was. So we visited the country in Cambuquita. We went to Sao Paulo, which is it's a big city like Rio, but it's more like industrial. And then you have Rio, which I think is just sort of awe-inspiring as a whole.
Yeah,
the nighttime, it takes on a different personality, I have to admit. It's kind of sketchy. But I feel
like a big club, basically.
Yeah. But I feel like we really experienced Brazil. Like, we kind of hit all of the big points. And
yeah, we're in the countryside a little bit, an industrial area for a little bit, and in Rio. It was really nice. It's really good. Good to see a lot there.
That's all I had to say about, I think, this episode and Brazil as a whole.
Yeah, Brazil, much nicer. They don't wall up their daughters there. And Denmark, beautiful country, but just that was a tough case, tough story. Yeah. It's hard to get that out of your head.
Brazil was warmer, too, which is always a plus.
We never get that. That was fantastic.
All right, guys. Well, that wraps up the Buried Alive episode of GHI. The little behind-the-scenes tidbits that we sort of kind of remember a little bit. You know, we try.
We try our best. We hit the highlights. Keep your daughters away from stable boys. If they get in trouble, wall them up.
On that note, until next time, we'll see ya.
See you next time. Thanks.